Hello everyone, welcome to the first ever ZK Mini Summit event. Woo! We are so happy to have all of you here. And to give you some background, ZK Mini Summit came from a few brainstorming sessions with the idea of how we can give back to the ZK community. Today, for like 3 hours, we are going to have different topics with thought leaders of the space. But to set you up for success, we are going to start with a presentation or like a book reading of zero knowledge proofs, explaining like I'm 5. And for you to follow along, under your seats, you will find a bag. And in the bag, there is a book. Yep, that's it, Dustin. You got it. So I would encourage you to open the book and get ready for the first session. Let's invite to the stage Marcin, who's the Chief Protocol Architect at Matter Labs, and who's the author of the book. Woo!
Okay, thank you, folks. So yes, as Albiona mentioned, please check under your book. This book started a little bit as a joke when I was trying to explain zero-knowledge proofs to one of the coworkers. Let him be unnamed for now. And something that started as a joke very quickly actually turned into like, hey, maybe we should make a real thing out of it. And that's how this book is created. So, as the title says, this is zero-knowledge proof, explain me like I'm 5. So it will give you some basics to start, but you're going to need to learn a little bit more before you can actually create a real circuit. So just to get the expectations right. Having said that, over the next couple minutes, we're going to go through the book. I'll try to do the reading part. There is not much text in there. It's mostly for children, so it's mostly focused on images. At the same time, there are some questions. Please do not hesitate to ask. I think we're going to have at least 1 or 2 mics. And also, there will be also questions available afterwards. So, without further ado, let's get into the book. And let's explain to you zero knowledge like I'm 5. So, imagine... Albi? So forget about zero knowledge, forget about blockchains for a second. Just let's go back. Children, let's go. Imagine a zoo that has many animals. For zero knowledge, we actually called a zoo a circuit, and the animals are gates. Now, imagine we also had boxes. Basically, 3 types of boxes. There are boxes that have a hidden number. There's a hidden number in a wooden box. These we call the variables. We also have glass boxes. They also hold a number, but for glass boxes, you can actually see what's inside. We call them public inputs. And then we have stone numbers. These don't change. These are clearly visible. You cannot actually modify what's in there. And these we call constants. Now, we had a set of animals, and now each animal has a special power. Animals can look inside the closed boxes. And then, depending on the type of the animal, they can be happy or sad. For example, we have equal zebra. So equal zebra is happy when 2 boxes have the same value. Now, if they don't have the same value, equal zebra is sad. Now, the important thing here is you don't know what's inside the box, but zebra does. So animals can also look at the glass boxes, they can also look at the stone numbers. And as I mentioned, each type of the animal has a different mathematical expression tied to it. So we have not greater than crocodile. And the crocodile is happy when the right number is bigger than the left number. And this is where the first part of zero knowledge comes in, is you don't know what's the number in the bottom box. But you know that the bottom crocodile is sad. So whatever that number is, it must be smaller than 5. Now, the important thing to remember is you don't see the values, but crocodile does. Now, we can have far more complex animals. Let's say the spider can actually look at 4 objects at the same time. It's the if spider. If the top box is 0, it would like to have the left and the bottom box to be equal. If the top box is 1, it wants the right and the bottom box to be equal. So look, the spider is happy. So here's the question to all of you adults in the room. Can you guess what number is in the top box? Yes? No? Okay. So in this case, we call a spider a selection gate. Now the zoo has a lot of animals, right? We have beavers for division, squirrels for modules, caterpillars for additions, and many, many more. And we can put all of these animals into more complex setups, basically creating complex circuits. If all animals are happy, this means that the circuit is fulfilled. The thing is that we don't need to see the values in the boxes, but we can just look at the animals. And what we say is if they're happy, it's good. And we can almost take a picture of the animals. Remember, the picture will not reveal what's inside the boxes. It will show you what's in the glass box. It will show you what's in the stone numbers. It will show you the happiness of animals. It will not show you the contents. And we can call the photo of all these happy animals a proof. So basically, proof becomes a photo. But enough talking. Let's actually build a circuit to solve the real-life 5-year-old problem. How to make sure that my sister split the candy equally. So here's the problem. Your mother left some candy. Your sister decided to split it between you and herself. How to make sure that she did a good job? So here's a simple circuit that takes care of this. So mom's candy is on the left. You don't know how much she left to you. But what you know is that there is a squirrel on top, there's the modulo 2, there's the beaver at the bottom, there's the division by 2. There's some sister candy that you don't know. There's also the caterpillar add on top. So if the circuit is correct, if all animals were happy, then whatever values you got should be correct. But let's take a look. If we actually zoom in, imagine your sister put numbers in these boxes. We don't know what number she put, but the one that I'm getting is not correct. The beaver is sad. She did something wrong. Actually, if you spend a couple more minutes, for adults in this room, spend a couple more minutes, you can actually see that there's a small problem with this, but I'll leave it as a homework. This actually means that sister gave you more than her. But anyway, you can take a look and try to prove it to yourself as a homework. But now if we go to the next slide, this is the positive outcome. Again, we don't know how much candy mom left. We don't know how much candy sister got, but if all animals are happy, this means that the 2 candy that we ended up with is the right value. Now, in practice, you probably heard about different ZK systems. Now, the way you can think about them is like different animals. You've probably heard about Plonky, heard about Halo. Think about them, same concept. Animals, gates, whatnot, they are just different types. And there are a lot of different provers. Because remember, the proof is the photo of happy animals. And there are different cameras that you can use to take the photo. You probably heard about snarks, starks, fries, KZGs. That's where it comes in. That's the technology that's used to take the picture. So next time someone is telling you, oh, I have a snark with Plonky. You're like, oh, sure, so you use this camera with these animals. Got it. Next. So now that we know the basics, let's talk a little bit about how these circuits are created. So you can imagine that there are zookeepers. So zookeepers, they create new animals. Let's not get into details how they do that. Let's say they just create new animals. And they create the scenarios. They figure out, okay, these animals with these boxes. Now, we call these zookeepers circuit builders or crypto people. And they're also visitors. So once circuits are created, the visitors arrive, and they can actually put numbers in the boxes. So if you're a visitor, you're coming in, you're putting a number in each box, and then you take a picture of the happy animals. If all animals are happy, this means that the values that you put in the boxes were correct. Again, you don't have to reveal to anyone what values you put. Animals are happy, values are correct. And the only thing that shows up on the photo are all the happy animals and the public inputs. And this picture is what we're calling a proof. Now, there can be mistakes. Right? A very common mistake is, there can be a mistake that zookeepers do. For example, imagine they put too many animals. This is what's actually called over-constraint. And in this scenario, you cannot come up with the numbers that make all animals happy at the same time. Like, look at this example. What kind of values can you put here to make both crocodiles happy? Answer, you cannot. This is called over-constraints, and you will not be able to generate a proof for such invalid circuit. There are also other bugs, like a missing animal. If you want to earn $1 million, find the missing animal. I am not joking. The examples of different bounty hunting for ZK proofs are all about finding the missing animal that if it's not there, you can actually put fake values in the boxes. And all animals will be still happy because, again, if one is missing, you will not be able to get that, right? So this is a very bad scenario, and we call this under constraint. And in systems, it can lead to invalid state transition being accepted, invalid state being committed to blockchains. So when you try to explain to your kids what do you do at work, it's, I'm looking for missing animals, honey. Now, real circuits have thousands upon thousands of animals. So looking at the picture to see all of them happy or sad would be very slow. That's why we have Zeek. Zeek is a special animal. Zeek can actually look at the pictures of other animals and be happy if all of them are happy, and be unhappy if at least one of them is unhappy. So we call Zeek recursive proofs or aggregate proofs. Has a special power. So remember, it can look at the picture with lots and lots of animals and just be happy or unhappy depending on their whole state. What this means, but now, the tricky thing is that Zeek, one Zeek might not be enough because it can look only at thousands. But with millions of animals and huge gates, we can actually have Zeeks looking at other Zeeks. Meaning we can have Zeeks can look at a picture of themselves. So we have Zeeks looking at animals. And that's what we start getting into recursive proofs. In practice, for systems like ZK Sync, we can have Zeek looking at Zeek looking at Zeek looking at animals. So like 4 levels, out of curiosity. So that's why at the end, we have one Zeek to prove them all. One Zeek on top of the circuit to prove that if he is smiling, then all the Zeeks below must be smiling, and all the animals at the very bottom must be smiling. And this means that the whole state transition, all of these animals that we had at the very beginning, all these small transitions, they must all be correct. So this checking that the last Zeek is smiling is what we call proof verification. And this is what's done on Ethereum. This way, the only thing Ethereum has to do is to look at one Zeek. And that's it. So if you want to learn more, if you go to this link, you can actually see a web page with both the book and interactive quizzes. So you will find an animals in there, and you can put things in the boxes, see if they are happy or sad, and try to solve some of them. So with this, I want to thank you all. Thanks for coming. I hope this was useful. I hope that it's, as I said, it's a little bit different approach to how zero proofs work. You're not an expert yet, but please wait for 2 more books, Eli 9 and Eli 15, and then you will be there. So, thank you.
Yeah, we're close enough. Hey everybody, my name's Nick. I am here to present, as Albie introduced, dumbass crazy ideas for on-chain dApps. All right? So, little intro about myself. My name's Nick. I'm a software engineer for Matter Labs. Here's my socials and website down there. I am relatively new to Web3, about 6 or 7 months in, and I'll sort of talk about that as I go through my presentation today. For those who want to follow along, this is a QR code to download these slides. We're also going to post these online, available after the presentation. But if you want to follow along now, feel free to scan this. Leave it up for a few seconds. Cool. So what am I going to be going through today? I'm going to talk about why did I do this presentation, and then I'm going to go through some of these ideas. At the very end, I'm going to wrap it up with some takeaways that hopefully we can all walk away with. So why did I do this presentation, right? Kind of goes back to I had first joined Matter Labs, and I had $100 worth of ETH. I wanted to figure out a way to spend that money. I looked for a bunch of different games that I could play on chain. I am very passionate about gaming. I wanted to see if I could support the local developer community. If there's like an indie game that was available, I thought, you know what? I would love to give them my money. So I started going and looking through some of the dApps that are available. And honestly, they were not great. Most of them just ended up not working, or if they did work, were just NFT shills. It wasn't fun, and I just wanted something more out of it. So I started looking beyond gaming. I started looking at other kind of dApps that existed out there. They were mostly finance-based, or finding ways to swap tokens, or trade NFTs, and it really felt like there was this lack of innovation that existed. It wasn't something that I, really felt passionate about giving my money to, and I wanted something fun, right? I wanted to spend my money, and I didn't know how or where to. So before going a little further into the presentation, I want to talk about my mental model about how I've come to think about Web3. So for me, I think about Web3 and specifically smart contracts as kind of like AWS Lambdas. So for those who don't know, AWS Lambdas are this serverless computing functions that exist, hosted by Amazon, and they're super convenient and easy to use. In the smart contract world, we have these calls and transactions. For something like an AWS Lambda, what that really equates in my mind to is, every call is a GET request. You're getting information. Every transaction is a POST request. You are making a change to the data that exists on chain. The difference here is who pays for making sure that these services exist. In the AWS Lambda world, it's whoever is paying for the Amazon account, your AWS account, right? You get billed at the end of the month. Smart contracts, you have to pay up front. You don't pay for the calls, the GET requests, but you are paying as a user the transaction costs, those post methods. Now there are differences, right? With an AWS Lambda, you can invoke them with HTTP requests, with events, or even through a scheduler. That's not the same with smart contracts. You can execute them or start a smart contract function from an HTTP request, but there is no way to call a smart contract function from an event that has happened on somewhere else on chain. There's no way to just start and execute a smart contract function based off of a cron job. Right? It needs to be initiated by the user. Another limitation is you don't have the full access to the resources like you would with an AWS Lambda. In AWS Lambda, you have access to potentially gigabytes of RAM, but in smart contracts, we're talking about kilobytes. Right? You have to live within these sort of restrictions of the current system right now. And that sort of gets me to the next point, which is I'm looking at these apps, and we have this sort of constraints that are built into the system, these limitations. But from my experience as an engineer, I've always seen that these limitations often foster creativity. And I'm not seeing that. But let me sort of talk about what do I mean by limitation fosters creativity. So there is this amazing YouTube interview by Ars Technica. They sat down with Andy Gavin, who is the co-founder of Naughty Dog. This is the team who created the Crash Bandicoot series, and they wanted to go through the war stories of what it was like to develop the original Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation before the PlayStation ever even got released. Right? This game launched at the same launch day as the PlayStation. So for them, they had similar restrictions. And their mentality, their philosophy at the beginning was no cycle of CPU, no GPU, or byte of memory would go unused. They would find hacks, they would find tricks to get to every single piece of resources that they could, whether they were supposed to or not. So one example of that was limited memory access. That's something that I had just talked about with Ethereum. And what was the case for the PlayStation was the PlayStation only had 2 megabytes of onboard memory on the console. Now, the disk of the game had about 640 megabytes. The game itself was about 60 megabytes, so most of it was like 90% empty. But the problem and the constraint was really this 2 megabytes of RAM, because the CPU and the GPU of the PlayStation could only ever access the RAM. It couldn't access the data directly on disk. Right? It just wasn't possible with the interfaces. It was too slow. It takes time to get data from the disk down to the RAM. So what did other companies do? They lived within these sort of boundaries. They built game levels that only had 2 megabytes worth of assets. So the original PlayStation games, the majority of them were very small. They had to fit in 2 megabytes. But what did Andy do and his team? They basically found a way to update the entire custom memory schema where they had 64 kilobyte chunks. And as you were walking through a game level, it would hot swap chunks of data that you would need directly from disk. So, in essence, by building out this hot swappable memory, you now had access to much larger game designs, much larger game levels. And they were doing things that no other game could at the time because it forced them to. Right? So I ask, the dApp developers that are out there, what if you didn't have these constraints that we have currently with Ethereum? What can be done? So that gets into the first crazy idea, what I'm calling Z64. It is, what if you could have an on-chain Nintendo 64 emulator? Is that even possible? Right? So where does this idea even come from? Where did I come to this? Yes, I'm passionate about gaming, but why the Nintendo 64? And one of the things that I had mentioned before is this idea that anytime you interact with a transaction, it's coming from a user, right? So video games today, whenever you are trying to save a game, typically you walk through and it's just auto-saved as you go along, right? That's not how it used to be. Whenever you played these older games on the Nintendo 64, you had to open up the menu, you had to choose save, you had to click yes, and you had to wait as the game is being actively saved on memory, and then you wait for that transaction to complete, and then you go about your day. People were just used to that. That is the flow, that is the limitation that they were used to. That is very similar to what we're seeing right now with Ethereum and transactions. So what can we learn if we look at the Nintendo 64 and the game building model of these sort of similar interactions and restrictions? So I basically started from there, and it turns out it's kind of possible. The first thing I realized is that there is a WebAssembly emulator for the Nintendo 64. So it is called N64 WASM, by the way, if you go look it up on GitHub. But it allows you to fully, in a browser, emulate the Nintendo 64 and play games in the browser. I was like, all right, awesome. All I have to do is make a website and host that on-chain with this JavaScript. Cool. Make a website with BossGG. All right, now that's fully on-chain. All right, that solves that problem. I now have an emulator that is fully on-chain that I can pull up through the browser. Next problem. What if I need to save the game at any point in time? Well, it turns out to save a game is about 16 megabytes. This is a problem because approximately that's going to cost you about 32 grand just to save the game once. Now, it's still feasible, right? This is crazy. You probably wouldn't want to do this, right? Just for one single game. But it got me thinking, and I started talking about this with some of my coworkers. You can actually use a Validium. And actually, if you don't need this data to live on L1, which I don't know if you need your Ocarina of Time game save state all the way up to L1, it can just live off chain, then these transactions go down to be pennies. Right? That's the majority of this cost where it's coming from. So theoretically, you could have a fully on-chain Nintendo 64 emulator experience. All right, let's go into idea number 2. The burner phone smart wallet. So for those who are not familiar with what a burner phone is, it's this prepaid phone that you can buy typically for cash at like a local gas station that people use and then like throw away once it's done, and it's has a lot of implications behind it, but that's the general idea. Could you have that sort of experience? Is there, I don't know what the need is, I'm not going to speculate, but could you do this for your smart wallets, right? And as I start thinking about it, it's really, could you have prepaid gift cards for smart wallets where you can only put in money once, and then from then on out, the funds can only exit, right? Technically, it's possible with some things like account abstraction. You can control with logic the ingress and egress of your transfers. You can add business logic in there to say, hey, you can actually do this if you really wanted to. Idea number 3. What if your smart contracts changed ownership randomly? Now, that's really, really scary for some people because there is a lot of money typically associated with a smart contract, and handing over an ownership of that contract means you are now exposing and handing over the ownership of that money. But just leave it up to RNGs and it's totally possible. It's a terrible idea. I would not recommend this at all. But what if the ownership of it changed every single day? Did you just create like a lottery system by doing this, right? And along the way, as I was thinking about how to implement this, I started learning about different ways for role-based access, right? This concept of ownership can be defined in a few different ways, and there are different ways of having role-based access. Also, you would need to have some sort of scheduler, right? I had mentioned at the beginning, like you can't just execute a smart contract function fully on-chain based off of a schedule. However, after going through some of the research, it turns out that there are schedulers that are available as a service. It will exist off-chain, but they do exist. And I started going down this rabbit hole of, okay, technically this is possible. I don't want to do it, but it's possible. Another idea. What if there was an automated cat feeder based on ETH tips? So imagine you had an animal shelter, right, where there was a webcam stream pointed at a bunch of cat feeders. And on this website, you could donate or tip ETH, and that would automatically dispense some snacks, and then the cats would interact. This would sort of, imagine me, at the beginning where I wanted to spend that $100, I would love to have donated that money, right? It's going to a good cause. It's going to keep that animal shelter open. But it's also that instant gratification. Once that transaction goes through, you're going to see, oh, the food gets dispensed and the cats are happy and they're all playing and probably, might be fighting each other for the food, but it's rewarding, and I know where that money is going, right? And the money that you're distributing for something like this, it could be used for keeping the website running, the power, the maintenance, anything else just goes to the animal shelter, like I described before. And who's to say this has to only be an animal shelter? For those who might have been at DevConnect in November, in Istanbul, there are a bunch of just wild cats that just roam the streets. They're totally friendly. They'll walk up to you. They're at most any park. But who's to say this same setup can't be set at a remote location where these cat hotels sort of exist in these parks? All you need is someone to constantly fill it up, and it's the same experience. And then I heard this whenever I pitched this to a few of my coworkers, so if anyone wants to do this, please feel free. Another one is this idea of a timestamp oracle. So what if on-chain you had your smart contract or your application had access to the current timestamp down to the 100 milliseconds? Right now, the only way you get access to a timestamp is what is the current block timestamp. Depending on what network or what protocol you're using, that could be a few seconds apart, right? It's not an accurate timestamp to what the actual time is right now. It's just when was the last block mined. And what you'll really need here is a network that can handle hundreds, if not thousands, of transactions per second. Because again, you're hitting this at 10 hertz, so 10 times a second, to be able to have that sort of frequency. But what could your application do if it had the most latest up-to-date current timestamp on-chain? Another thing that you might realize is this is going to get expensive. I'm making 10 transactions a second. I can't keep this up forever. Even if I wanted to sponsor an application like this, put in the funds, that's going to drain my account real quick. But that's when you start diving deeper into applications or networks that have state diff-based fee models. So with these sort of models, you start learning that, you only really get charged for the difference in the data at the beginning and at the end of your batch. So even though you're updating it 10 times a second, if the batch is, let's say, 2 seconds apart, you're only going to get charged for the beginning value to the end value. Another idea, what if your biometric telemetry, your health telemetry, is fully on-chain? Right? What if, similar to that timestamp oracle, it is constantly being updated and just available? Right? What if, let's go into some examples. So what if you could prove that you exercised at least 3 times a week? Right? Is that cheaper life insurance? What are some applications behind that? Is there any way to anonymize this data? Right? That was the basic. As soon as I asked this, crazy idea to some of my coworkers, it's like, I didn't want to do that. I don't want anyone knowing this information. That's very private. That's PII. But maybe if we anonymized it, that could work. What if also you use this as a reward system? What if you built an ecosystem where if you proved your heart rate was above normal for 30 minutes a day, then after a full week, you get a small prize pool that gets distributed between all your friends, right? And it incentivizes all of you to make sure that you're exercising at a constant pace and you're keeping each other credible as you're going through this. So here are some final thoughts. Here are some takeaways that I want to make sure that I sort of cover here, which is, one, get creative. Like, these, don't constrain yourself to the idea of just the limitations of the system, right? Don't be afraid to share these crazy ideas. Something like a hackathon is perfect for making sure that you feel like you can just, try something for the sake of trying something. And Ethereum's ecosystem and the feature set is just expanding rapidly. So take advantage of it, right? State diff-based fee models or validiums or whatever all these examples that I went through, those are becoming a reality now. So understand what they are and try and use them. Another big one for me is we're better than just another finance dApp, right? None of these ideas were like finance-based, but I really cringe at seeing another just NFT shill sort of app that's calling itself a game. And lastly, like, asking these crazy questions or crazy ideas is gonna help you learn something new and think differently. Whenever I bring this presentation up with my coworkers, I left every single time knowing something different. Whether it was, hey, that actually existed about 2 years ago with this one side project, or hey, actually that might be possible now because we're going to have something like Validiums. So, one final note is ZK Quest. For those who haven't signed up, it is a web app that we built just for ETHDenver, where you can go and complete coding challenges and puzzles to earn ETH. This is something that we sort of built together as a different approach to hackathons. So if you want to sign up, the booth is going to be here all week. It's going to be down that way. You probably have already seen it. And thank you.
Yep, good. He's getting pressure here.
ZK safety win.
And we are back with the next panel. Thank you very much for your patience, everyone. Let's get a round of applause for everyone who joined us today. Woo! This panel is called ZK Snarks Rule Everything Around Me, that Vitalik presented at ETHCon in Montenegro, and we were very inspired by that. That's why we decided to bring thought leaders of the space, starting with Jason, Zach, Ben, Jordi, and Benedict. Porter will be the one who's hosting the panel, so let's just welcome them again, and let's hear what they say.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm super excited because basically the way this panel was created was I got to ask all of my favorite guests, and they all said yes. And we're going to talk about how ZK will rule the world. But first, we will do the slightly boring intros. So if everyone could just say your name, introduce yourself and your project.
Yeah, I'm Jason Morton from Ezekiel. It's a project to make AI verifiable and private with ZK.
Cool. Hi, hello. Yeah, I'm Zach. Does this need to be a boring intro? Extra boring? Who here's heard of Aztec? Yes. So yeah, that's my jam. So yeah, I'm a CEO, co-founder, and our mission is to add strong privacy guarantees to this wonderful distributed world computer that we're all building and using.
Ben Lifshitz, VP of Research at ZK Sync.
So I'm Jordi Bailina. I'm the technical lead at Polygon ZKVM. We're trying to just scale Ethereum. That's the main goal. And yeah, and very much a developer, engineer, and Ethereum fan, I would define myself.
Yeah, my name is Benedict Bunz. I am one of the co-founders of Espresso Systems. We're building a shared sequencer for ZK rollups, but also rollups in general. And I have some takes on where ZK actually doesn't rule everything, where you need other tools such as consensus to solve some issues. But I also have a second hat. I'm also a professor at New York University, where I work on zero knowledge proof. So I also do believe that ZK will just rule a lot of things.
Nice. Welcome, everyone. So we will have some spicy takes. I know a lot of these people have been on a lot of panels before, and I don't want this to just be another boring panel. But starting off, we're going to...
All those panels were very exciting.
Right. Sorry. Very exciting panels, and we'll swap seats around, and then we go speak the same stuff at the next conference. But anyways, let's zoom out, and let's go 20, 30 years in the future. And I want you guys to imagine all of your dreams come true. ZK has taken over the world, or however much Benedict wants it to. And so like your engineering goals are hit, like all of the things that you want to happen. What does the world look like at this point in time?
Sure, I'll start. So one of the things we think about is not just AI, but kind of general analytics that can be done in ZK. I think one kind of final scenario for ZK is that it completely replaces all of the kind of ERP databases, everything that lives inside and between companies. And so every time you look at a financial statement on Edgar, you know that that number underneath it is a proof of every single transaction that went into that number. And I think that would be an interesting new foundation for the economy. It would allow a lot more trust as well as confidentiality, but trust in the numbers that were presented in investments and in other decisions that we make.
Yeah, good answer. What is blockchain really for? I would say that it's a coordination engine, and it's trust infrastructure. And at the moment, it's a very primitive, limited coordination, and it provides limited trust because of lack of strong privacy guarantees and limitations with scaling and data. And ZK can solve all of these. So where are we going to be in 20, 30 years? We're going to be in a world where it's much harder to create a monolithic company that leverages its profit through information asymmetries. If we succeed, I hope we create a world where users are much more in control of their own data. Once that becomes practical and possible, I suspect that there's going to be a strong push to make it inevitable. People are going to be much closer to the institutions and structures that they are governed by, and will ideally, if not themselves actively participate, will have an expectation of being able to do so, which means having a more pluralistic forms of governance, both politically and socially. I see it as a world where it's much harder to create monopolies, a world where it's much easier to start competing in industries because everything will be much more composable, and barriers to entry will be much lower because of the composable nature of what we're doing. But ultimately, it's going to be a society where there's more trust. It'll be a strong trust society, not a weak trust society, which is where we're heading at the moment, where people don't have trust in their institutions, and they don't have trust in the governance structures that they're subordinate to.
I mean, look, so fundamentally, this is about building an affordable, high-integrity computational layer with optional privacy in a way that cannot be exploited, right? It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's sort of, at the end of the day, that's what these systems become. And certainly we already see enough of sort of traditional finance functions being moved to that. But I think it's going to be super interesting to watch as we have sort of users other than like humans actually starting to step into the space. That is to say, you have agents, autonomous agents, things of that sort, programs that react to data. I think that's where, you know, basically this high integrity layer will start shining, and where the demand for higher capacity, for higher throughput, potentially lower latency, where all of these things will become even more important than they seem now.
Yeah, you know, it's more philosophical, maybe answer here, but I believe in a free world. When I say free world, is free people living in there, people that just live happy, that have some happiness in there, people organize in communities, not in states or not in these. So communities that you can choose to opt in or to opt out. And for that, you need some system of trust that you don't need to trust in a specific person. So you just trust in numbers. I think you were mentioning very much before that. And yeah, to create this community base where people just think in having fun and working for the other peoples to have fun and enjoying where we are living in this world. Yeah, we need to solve conflicts that the humans have today. And if you do a deep analysis of what are the big problems that humanity is suffering right now, most of them you will discover that end up being trust problems. If we can solve that, or we can add a piece, if we can add or piece so that the trust of humans is less needed, and we can trust in math, in science, I think this is we will get a better world, and that's my goal for my life. But I don't know if it's going to be 20, 30, 50 years, whatever it is, but this is what I'm working for.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've met Chad. I would love to live in all of these worlds, but yeah, I think one very concrete thing that I don't think will take 20, 30 years is that there's a lot of generative data, with the advent of AI, and I think that sort of necessitates more like sort of verifiability of where that data is coming from. And I think that's a very immediate problem that we're facing, but that I think is very solvable using ledgers and using zero knowledge. But, yeah.
Nice. I think it's actually a great summary. All these visions are really cool, and they actually do seem all really solvable. Like, you guys are all working on projects that directly do this. So is there any reason why these futures wouldn't work out, or any roadblocks or bad things that could happen along the way?
Yeah, I think one of the roadblocks that we face every day, maybe not so much here in magical Ethereum land, but if we try to sell this to someone outside, who's not here in Denver with us, is that they have a trouble understanding what exactly it is that we're doing, what the guarantee that we're providing is, and whether the trust assumptions that we've now made are actually better than the trust assumptions that are provided by like a trusted enclave or just by a legal contract. And so I think the biggest barrier in my mind is not really technical, because I think we've shown that the technical innovation can happen at an extraordinarily fast pace. So the real barrier is more social and educational and kind of marketing. Can we figure out a way to explain the benefit of this technology such that everyone can understand it, right? We've done a tremendous job, for example, with HTTPS, right, with secure socket type technology and certain kinds of very limited encryption. But outside of the crypto space, people don't even really feel comfortable with the digital signature, and we're asking them to understand a generalized digital signature. So I think we have a lot of work to do in making it seem useful to the average person.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree about it being really about education. I think the fundamental issue is the tech sucks. Like, it's so bad. Who has tried to write ZK SNARK circuits? Come on, raise your hands. Right. Who's deployed ZK SNARK circuits in any kind of production setting? Yeah, it's fucking hard. Sorry for swearing. So I think, people don't understand it and it's unfamiliar, blah, blah, blah. That's because it's weak and it doesn't reach into their lives in a meaningful way, and we have a lot of work to do there. But that's not why we aren't going to succeed, because technology is inevitable. There are so many reasons why we'd fail. Let's just look back to the first generation cypherpunks in the 90s, right? The battles that they fought were around ensuring strong encryption was available to protect user data. And so they had to have a fight to legalize encryption software. And they won all these battles, and but the war that they were fighting was a war for an open, permissionless internet where information was free and humans would be their own autonomous agents surfing the information superhighway. And my God, did that not happen? Like we're all bloody commodities. You're a commodity. You know, like what's the sum total of your commoditizable information versus the amount of money that black market smugglers could get for your organs? I reckon the information might be more valuable at this point. You know, you're not the customer, you're the product. Like for every single goddamn application that you use online. So the cypherpunks failed. And now, look at us. You know, we're talking about, oh, we're going to change the world. You know, we're going to create this wonderful world of free agency and democracy and openness. This is a $1 trillion casino. You know, like that. None of what we're doing is reaching into the lives of the average people, ordinary people. Nobody buys their daily goods and services with cryptocurrencies unless they're very technologically well connected. Bitcoin is not the kind of threat to sovereign currencies that its creators intended. And there are so many difficulties with pulling out like any kind of positive utopian vision, I think, out of the relatively corrupted, flawed foundations that we've had to build off of. So what are the problems? Like, privacy does not get accepted. You know, we as in we, the entire community, just can't make it work in a way that users are willing to tolerate it. I'm wrong with my thesis that privacy is the missing link to make blockchain reach into the real world and become mainstream. Without privacy, we are building the tools for the next surveillance state. We're building networks where every single transaction is happening on a global permissionless so for now, ledger, where everything is visible, where the sum total of all of your transactions and all of your payments, what you own, what you have, is viewable by all. Like, what the hell? Like, everyone's like, oh yeah, privacy, yeah, we'll add that on later. You know, it's just an easy fix, it's turnkey. Like, are you mad? You know, like, you're like this, we're building dangerous technology masqueraded as a dumb casino at the moment. And we're just repeating the same mistakes as the Wave 1 cypherpunks, the way I see it.
But like, what do you think are the mistakes? Because like, I don't know, like a product that I think about sometimes is PGP, like just encrypted email, right? Which is not very technically hard. Like what we're trying to do with zero knowledge proofs is significantly harder. It is absolutely awful, right? Like no one has ever used it. Like seriously, you know, it could be the default. Like your emails could be by default encrypted in some way. I feel like that wouldn't be that hard to do, and yet it doesn't exist. And I'm not entirely sure what the reason is. Is it like hard to, like, is it hard to deploy, or is it, you know, like I don't think it's like, you know, evil Uncle Sam, you know, trying to prevent it. Like I like genuinely wonder why not, and like how can we learn from these failed attempts in the past?
I can hazard a guess. It's that the problem is society benefits as a whole when people use these technologies that are backed by strong encryption. For the individual, it's a meaningless difference. You know, you take some random person, so just some average Joe, right, going about their lives. Do they care about their emails being able to be like read by the government? Like, no, and they don't even know that can be the case.
Not entirely. I mean, so just about every survey you do in privacy, you'll basically have this sort of 10-80-10 kind of thing, which is 10% don't care about much of anything, then 10% are sort of the tinfoil demographic, and then 80%, you know, sort of negotiate with me, right? So basically depends on the circumstances and depends on the value prop. And then, you know, there is a bunch of products out there that are quite addictive, where the value prop is that people are willing to give up on their privacy to get, you know, free usage, right? Or seemingly free usage.
I think that all the technology is, I would say, quite neutral by itself. I mean, all the technologies can be used for good and for bad. But the technology, I mean, if we think that the technology is a bad thing, then we would not advance. We would not do technology. And if we think that the technology is a good thing, I mean, then maybe somebody is going to take over. So we need to understand that all the technologies can be used for good and for bad. And it's our responsibility, and here I fully agree with you, Zach, is that it's our responsibility that this technology, as it grows, it's also used for good things. It's used for improving the good of the humanities. Of course, there are risks, and I agree that we need to be aware of those risks. The risks that you mentioned, they are facts and they are reals. Okay, so we need to be aware of that, and that's why supporting privacy is an important thing. But the technology is not only, this technology is not only privacy. Scalability is important, usability is important. There are other things that are important and needs to be improved. And when you join all together, all the pieces, of course, including privacy, including censorship resistance, including all the values that are important, if we put it in the right way, we will get a better society. If we put it in the wrong way, we will have a worse society.
I agree with that. I'm saying that without privacy, it is a worse society. As in, transparent, distributed ledgers, I would argue, if that's the end state, they are net negative on this planet. Net negative, because of the amount of social control that can be exerted by having perfect information transparency around individuals' resources, what they own and how they spend them, is far too damaging.
I think to take a slightly different take, I think part of the problem with privacy, as we're conceiving of it right now, is if you try to sell privacy to an individual, you have this problem, they don't care, it's a lot of work, and the government would actually rather that they not have it. But there are plenty of other actors in society that have an actual obligation, right? So they have an obligation under regulations to keep user data private, or not to collect user data, or not to keep it. And so I think if we focus our energy on kind of companies that have to maintain confidentiality, companies that have to use their users' data in some specific way, we might have an easier time actually delivering privacy to the end user.
Let me be a little bit controversial here with you, Zach. I agree with you in the privacy, you know that, but I would prefer a world where all the transactions are public, than a world where very few people and people that you don't control have access to your transactions and not the rest of the world.
Yeah, but that's not where we're at the moment. At the moment, everyone's transactions, it's a melange of chaos, right? We have cash, we have an enormous number of differentiated payment platforms where it's actually quite difficult for, at least in a nominal democracy, for a government institution to actually have perfect visibility over an individual and their assets and their finances. Especially not in a very algorithmic, deterministic way where you can just run a query and on anyone and get that information.
Please don't misunderstand me. I truly believe that we need privacy, and privacy is a value. It's a fundamental value in the space, and we need to solve privacy. Okay? But said that, I prefer transparency, which is another property that we are adding here. It's also important, and it's also a value that's interesting to have.
I was just going to say, look, let's not forget that the public blockchain use case is not the only case that's out there, right? The situation is very different if you start speaking to banks, corporates, consortia of, I don't know, car manufacturers, people who deal with logistics and all these other use cases that in some cases, go back to 2018, 2019. Those people, yeah, to them, privacy is very much needed for all sorts of reasons that have nothing to do with personal freedoms, that just have to do, they make good business sense, right? And then you don't have to sell them on that. They understand why it's needed.
Yeah, I agree. These are all tractable problems. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think that. But it's a challenge that needs to be considered, as in the way that we're planning on going about it is not, privacy is not the, it's not the product, because not enough people care. Privacy is something that is an essential requirement for certain products and services whose value prop is completely unrelated, and those I think are the targets that need to be chased in the early days.
But Zach, the other point is that we are the starting point right now, and regarding privacy, currently we have zero privacy. The starting point.
That's not true. That's absolutely not true.
Look, maybe we had privacy we will have more privacy 20 years ago, before the mobile phones, before we had the mobile phones. Today's, all the governments have access to all your data that you have on your iPhone. This is where the starting point right now.
I think that's, to be honest, I think that's a bit reductive, because what they do not have is coordinated accesses, and they do not have a single source of truth that's fully legible that they can easily run algorithmic analysis on. You know,
I'm talking about the blockchain. I'm talking just real phone.
Yeah,
Phones
that's what I'm saying, that they
hackable.
don't have what I just said. They don't have that.
KYC, you know who you are, you know their phone, and they have. I mean, there is services right now. There is services that all the states can buy, and
Yeah,
they just say, I want to spy this guy.
We're talking past each other. What I want to say is there is friction. Governments can acquire information about an individual, but it takes effort. They cannot acquire all information about all individuals at with a very low cost basis, and then perform a lot of analysis on it.
Zach, they're using AI to organize all this information.
Okay, I think I'll bring it back and take us to a new question. But that's great from all the panelists. Let's go to Benedict and talk more about the technical side of things. So you've published tons of papers. You're working in both industry and academia. Could you talk some about like the balance you've seen between those? Like industry, at least in cryptography, actually seems to be doing in general a lot of work that doesn't start from academia. And how do the two work together?
Yeah, I mean, I think that. I think it's a complicated space, and I sometimes I have the feeling, like we haven't reached anything yet, and we still have so much to do. But then there's things that make me incredibly optimistic, and one of the things that makes me the most optimistic is there is a beautiful synergy right now, and I think there's inherent reasons why that is between academia and industry. We have really cool ideas that come from industry that then lead to sort of, more academic research, which then leads back into industry, and so on and so forth, and hard problems that like people literally are expecting, we have these hard problems, but we believe in science, we believe that science can solve this problem, and smart people from wherever they are, whatever background they have, they can tackle these problems, and that's just so cool to see. And there's fundamental reasons why that, and it's way better than in AI, where which is also an emerging field where academia and industry have a thing to play, but their data is private, right? And access to data is really important in order to make even just new innovations and certainly products. And one of the cool things about blockchains is that by its nature, it's open source and it's openly accessible, and you need to actually show that the product that you're building has value and is trustable, right? And that works so well with this academic model that we have. And so there's this, which is, I think, also they used to say that in the best case, it takes 7 years for some cryptographic innovation to be deployed in practice, right? And now, I don't know, I've had, less than 1 year, right? It's I think I wrote this paper, and then within 7 months it was deployed in Monero, and it's sort of powering Monero. And yeah, it's a really, really fun space to be in and to work in, and it makes me, when you have both companies that are profit-oriented, which is totally fine, and smart people in academia working together and tackling these hard problems, that is what makes me optimistic that, sort of at least the technical challenges we can solve. And it's been it's exploded, and it's really, I cannot be more positive and optimistic about it.
Let me add to that. So I've been an academic for about 20 years, right? Mostly within an industry bent, but I've been publishing papers for about 20 years. And frankly, I have not seen a space, or have not experienced personally, firsthand, a space that moves quite as fast as this one. And of course, AI is sort of competition that we have. But the level of sort of intermingling, the level of kind of exchange of ideas, and the speed with which it happens here in ZK specifically is quite astounding, right? And again, I lived through a previous sort of wave of ZK innovation back around 2013, 2014, right? Got some interesting results back then too. But I mean, nothing compared to what we're seeing now, right? It's just like the the speed at which results are coming out in the form of papers, right? I mean, like oftentimes we don't even bother submitting things; they just go onto ePrint or archive, and people read them within days, right? Or like the speed with which experimentation is happening, again, quite astounding.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I think that the kind of the intrinsic incentives of blockchain are extremely positive sum in many ways, and it's an area where good ideas rise to the top because they're not controlled by like individual factions that are trying to monetize them. They just become another piece of a very composable framework where they add value to a lot of different projects, different people. And yeah, it's really positive to see. I think the quality of opportunities available to competent people in this space is so much greater than any other industry I've ever either been in myself or observed from the sidelines.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit earlier about some of the political problems and sort of human rights issues that we hope to address with the technology. I was also an academic as a professor of mathematics before starting this company, and you sort of saw, I would say, 4 waves of turning math into money, right? Like, what are the options if you want to make a career outside of academia? And sort of wave 1 was defense, and wave 2 was maybe trading, and wave 3 was maybe advertising, and this is wave 4. And this is the wave that I felt okay leaving that academic job, because I felt like I could wake up and do something about problems that I saw in the world, and that the actions and technology that I was building actually could have a positive impact. Of course, there's a lot of froth. Of course, there's a lot of issues. But I think it's easier for me to sleep at night, I think, than if I had gone one of those other routes of turning math into money.
Jim Simons did very well in wave number 2, right? In the trading wave. Jim Simons.
Yeah, I think if we have one value that probably right now is in danger, and is this collaboration environment that we are in the space. Of course, this is why academia likes, because academia has been also always about collaboration. On that, this is an important value. Here for me, it's a call, especially to the tech people, to the people that's interested in engineers, people, mathematicians, people that's interested in the technology, to keep this value in mind. The pressure from the society, from the competitive, from the marketing teams, from the business teams. Money is money, and the pressure is huge. But here is a call, for technical people, for free technical people, for people that's interesting, to keep this collaboration. And this is, if we keep this is much better for the industry. It's even better for the organizations, for the corporate organization itself, okay? Because they've been an evolution, okay? So we get, and we are in a blue ocean in this space. So this is even good from the business perspective. But one of the biggest dangers that we have in the space is that at some point we stop collaborating. So even if sometimes goes against your heart, we need to impose ourselves. Let's act as free persons and continue collaborating. Do not hide information. Do not hide technical information for patents, for business reasons, for whatever. Just share your knowledge. And if we all technicals, we keep as that, we are going to advance much, much, much faster. And this value is important, and here I think that from the academics, that's, if we keep this, the academics, they are already been doing that for years on that. We should be an example for other industries and keep this value as we have been doing until now.
I think, there's one, while we're on this topic, there's one. Sometimes there's some small frictions between sort of academia and industry. And also, by the way, to your point, keep funding research. But it's one small friction is that, academics like to write their papers, with, like very formal, and they like to get their citations and brownie points. And the greatest trick we ever pulled is that, as society, is that we, get to underpay academics, but they get their brownie points. So keep giving them brownie points. It's very important. But then, technical people like to bring things out in blog posts very fast, just put the idea down. And I think both are great, and we need both. And I don't think one sort of like obliterates the needs for another. Only because an idea has been written as a blog post doesn't mean that someone else can formalize it and write it in a much more like formal way with mathematical proofs and all of that. And only because something only because you have an idea doesn't mean you need formal training in order to publish it. If it's a good idea, just write it up in whatever way you can or care about, but put it out there. Just exactly as Jordi said, we need to keep this culture of open source, of open publishing. I think it's one of the strongest assets we have as an industry.
It should not be incompatible to be formal and to be clear and that accessible for the teams. I think it should not be incompatible. I know that sometimes you need to do an extra effort for compatibilizing both things, but I think it's, if crypto went so fast, and here I'm looking here people that wrote some papers, is because the people that wrote the paper, they not only did the formal part, they also did a huge effort to go a step farther in the paper and explain the protocol, explain the whatever they was explaining in an easier way for the people that are less used to read papers to to understand the basics. Maybe going after the formality, which again I respect, and it's important, it's essential in the crypto space.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be the same person, right? I think ideally, you do everything. You write, formal academic paper, an informal blog post, an implementation and everything. But not everybody is suited to do all of that, right? Like someone might not have the formal training to write a perfect paper. That's okay. I think we can again use the power of collaboration to have someone else can explain a paper. I think that's totally okay, and I've seen, and this is happening, which is great.
I think there is tons of willingness to go up and down the spectrum, and again, not everybody has to do everything, right? I think there is a lot of willingness to sort of do handoffs. Of course, people need to learn how to do it better, and this takes some time. But frankly, look, for years I worked in areas where, you have a paper, and then it takes at least 5 years to see any glimpse of that in production, right? Any glimpse of that, seriously. And so compared to that, things are happening blazingly fast. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I see a lot of willingness, even in the roll-up space, right, for people to do things together. And we are on the research team starting some collaboration with other roll-ups, and certainly we would love to see more of that, and perhaps eventually standards around some of these things. But at this point, let's just see more of that and see where that takes us.
Okay. All right. Speaking of collaboration, we have all of these super smart people on stage who are publishing papers and creating ZK VMs and ZK AI and privacy and crazy things. And we have all these wonderful people in the audience here who are just dying to know how they can end up like you guys at some point. So what advice can you give to the audience that they can start working on to end up helping with this future that we're looking for?
I can. Do you want to go first? Or?
Go ahead.
I can give the cynical answer, and then I can give the real answer. The cynical answer is go to www.aztec.network and download our sandbox and start developing today. We've got a great grants program. And in all seriousness, it's amazing tech. Hack on it. We've already had several teams that have actually created startups out of what they can do with our tech. But more seriously, okay, the thing is, if I look at how I came into this space, I'm not sure it's a model that can easily be replicated because there was just a lot of serendipity and circumstance, right? I came into the ZK space when it was still relatively new. And and I had basically I didn't know ZK. I learned it from scratch in 6 months and was able to make meaningful contributions and publish papers. And that's not as easy anymore. But I can give more general advice, which is basically find an existential problem that speaks to you. You know, find a sense of belonging. Like if you're working on a project and you're getting as like intrinsic satisfaction from working on it, and you feel like you belong, you're in the right place. Keep going. And if you're not there yet, then maybe you need to explore other alternatives. But like you need that existential need to drive you, because if you don't have that, you're not going to be prepared to grind the 20-hour days or whatever it is for multiple years and change roles, wear different hats, learn different skills in order to succeed.
Yeah, I can just, I think what Zach said is very correct. I think it really depends on who you are. You know, there's great academic learning resources out there. Coursera has a great and free cryptography course that teaches you the basics of cryptography. There's tons of YouTube videos on sort of learning about zero-knowledge proofs. There's obviously amazing libraries, you know, that you can hack around with if that's what you do, you know, just starting to play around with. I think one thing that really, one advice that I would give is that it's really helpful to be comfortable with abstraction. So for example, not knowing exactly, sometimes it's good to dive deep and know exactly how something works, but sometimes it's also very useful to just know what it does. So for example, if you just understand what a zero-knowledge proof does, it allows you to prove that something is true without revealing why it's true. That's sometimes okay to understand everything you need. You don't need to understand how they work. Or sometimes I get people that come to me, it's like, oh, I started to learn about zero-knowledge proof, and then I got stuck at elliptic curves. I'm like, I don't really know how elliptic curves work either. That's way deep down the line. You don't need to know that. You can sort of just be comfortable with some abstraction of it, and then just knowing how some things work, and then you can build on top of these things. But yeah, it's just I think hacking around with a library is one of the best ways to start, and yeah.
Get your hands dirty. I mean, that's a problem that's common to everything. I would say the vision maybe from the developer, for people that loves coding. I mean, this is very much my passion. Just take some of the protocols. I mean, just try to create by hand an Ethereum transaction and send it to Ethereum transaction and see that it's mined and it's accepted. If we implement elliptic curves, if you implement the CDSA, if you implement numbers, the finite field, some finite field libraries, coding. I mean, just trying to understand by coding. When you code something means that you probably have a good understanding. Well, not always, but in general, in crypto, if you don't understand what you are doing, is very much you probably will end up giving up. So for me, the way to get in the space was coding. It's coding. That's what I like to do. I think you can get a good level. Maybe if you want to write papers, then there is other path. Then we need more math, more abstraction on that. But I just want to share here my experience that coding and trying to understand what's going on, maybe studying a little bit of math to understand what's going on. This is the best way to get in.
So I can also do a plug for us. Of course, one of the things we built was a system that lets you just write in Python. So you can just write in a Python Jupyter notebook. You can write ordinary PyTorch and compile it to an AI model, which is a zero-knowledge circuit. That's a great way to get started and play with it. Of course, I agree that the right way to do it is kind of play with the thing, start to think about what you want to happen. Very soon, you will reach the limits of the technology, because it really is a young technology, although it's moving very fast. And then you start to dig in onto how far down the rabbit hole you'd like to go in understanding, the kind of math you need to add. And that can go all the way to very deep algebraic geometry, right? So I started with algebraic geometry from Robin Hartshorn, right? And then somehow way down the line, I find myself doing extremely applied algebraic geometry. So the math that underlies it is extremely beautiful, and I would encourage you to dig into it, but don't think you need to learn any of it to start.
So look, my take is that there already, even on this stage, there are people of fairly different backgrounds. My background is in systems, right? Let's say, as opposed to cryptography. But as the space expands, I think there will be even more diversity that you're likely to see. I think what's important is that given how fast the space is shifting, is finding a large, long-term problem that really appeals to you, right? On a deep, sort of psychological, even emotional level. This is the kind of thing that you're happy to work on for the foreseeable future. It really helps because this is how this is what forces you to learn. This is what forces you to overcome obstacles as they come. This is what forces you to sort of reconfigure your forces as circumstances change and, things change around you, right? I mean, I don't know. The innovation in proof systems, we see like a new one being announced like every, 3 weeks or something these days. So, yeah, that's my take.
Cool. All right, I hope everyone is very inspired about the future of ZK now. I think that's all we have time for, so let's thank our panelists.
Yeah, that was fun. We got some controversial takes.
All right, awesome.
My height. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, do you mind helping me get this up a little bit?
Everyone can listen to me.
Am I loud and clear?
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you.
Oh, hello. There we go. We
One,
have
two,
a mic
three.
check.
Yep.
I need to eat the microphone.
Thank you.
I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Front and center.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a microphone for
I
questions?
feel like I'm going to lick this. It's like,
You'll be able to do
I feel like I'm
microphone
going to
for
like
questions if you
accidentally.
want? All right, cool. If we got it, we'll see if we have questions. All right.
Oh, you're a pro.
Maybe we can join. Yes.
I don't want
No, I need good posture.
Oh,
for this.
nice. Okay. I might just hold on to mine. I like fidgeting with my hands. Welcome, everybody. Let's get this show on the road. We'll stick right on schedule. My name is Braden, or BX Pana, from Matter Labs, the team behind ZK Sync. And you're joining us for the good, the bad, and the ugly to take the next few minutes to take a look at the good of the technology and achievements from different ZK rollup projects, the bad, some of the technical things that they've run into, and then we're going to take a look at the ugly and take a little bit, turn the stone of community and take a look at what's going on underneath it instead of just the shininess on the outside. So we're going to start off the segment, just a little introduction from each of our guests and let them just give a little 1 minute intro about who they are, where they come from. Go ahead, Alex.
Hey, my name is Alex, and I am community manager at Tyco. So I handle all things community, Discord, Twitter. I'm a little more on the ecosystem side, so trying to find really fun, interesting things for people to do on Tyco. And that's about it.
Hey guys, I'm Shariar. I'm on the partnerships team at Scroll. So if you're not familiar, Scroll is an open source, BICO compatible, community first ZK AVM. We launched on mainnet in October. And in my role at Scroll, I work across a bunch of different initiatives like DeFi, staking, restaking, stablecoins, a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, hi, I'm Emily. I do developer relations at Linea. That means a lot of different things, so I can't tell about like my day-to-day because I feel like it changes like crypto. Yep. But anyways, Linea, yeah, we are an EVM equivalent ZK rollup, moving towards a type 2, eventually type 1. And yeah, where types thrive.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sisyphos. I work at Matter Labs, the team behind ZK Sync. I'm a community manager. We're focused mostly on the developer community right now and been focusing on the users in the last 2 years. And ZK Sync is a Type 4 ZK VM. We've been on mainnet since March last year, last ETHDenver, and I'm happy to discuss with all of you the good, the bad, and the ugly of ZK VMs.
Sweet. Thank you, guys, and we really appreciate you being here. And like I was saying, we just wanted to give an opportunity community to just have a little bit more of a say and show to the world of developers, especially at a bit of week here, what goes on behind the scenes. But before we get into that, I just want to make sure we cover, the technical bases. So we're going to start with the good and just give you guys a minute to talk about from the technology standpoint, what are the good things that you guys feel have been accomplished by your project or by your protocol, and like the future achievements that you guys are trying to achieve achieve what you guys are trying to do as well. So let's start off. We'll go switch up the order. We'll go backwards. So Esteban.
All right. Wow, it's been super exciting to launch the first ZKVM 1 year ago on mainnet, and that has been a great technical achievement. I think we were on mainnet before the whole Ethereum community was expecting to see an ZKVM on mainnet. So that was like something that was amazing to go through. More recently, I think one of the technical advancements that I'm super excited about has been our new prover. We published and is live on production the new prover called Buju, which decreased substantially the fees on ZK Sync, and I think since then we've been consistently able to manage, I believe, the cheapest fees as a layer 2, and I think that's an exciting technical achievement. I think Bujum is also a great system because it has a very low hardware requirement. So when it comes to decentralization one day and having a decentralized prover network, having low hardware requirement is, I think, something that would enable to have a proper decentralized prover network. So these are the two technical achievements that I'm most proud and happy about over the last 2 years.
Nice, excellent. Emily?
Yeah, definitely a lot of really cool things about Linea. I think I want to speak more from like an ecosystem of technology standpoint. So if you guys don't know, Linea is powered, our circuits are powered by Gnark. So Gnark is an open source ZK circuit library that is the fastest snark on the market. And it's a Golang, and there's a lot of things to say about it, but if you've ever interacted with like ZKBNB, Seller, ZK Bridge, everything, like Gnark powers those, and it's like that's an in-house team with the that at consensus, right? So that's really cool. I kind of want to take the other view of like again leveraging ecosystem and open source projects. So Linea, and any of you guys call me out if this is untrue, is the only L2 that is multi-client, right? So we support Nethermind, Bezu, Geth out of the box. Which is really, like, I think a huge technical achievement. I can't explain how they do it. They're just intelligent people. But yeah, I think that's kind of something that people don't really think about at all. Especially when we keep talking about decentralization, multi-client security, blah, blah, blah. Like, ZK, yeah, I don't know. But anyways, that's really cool. That I'm really proud of our team. And I think a lot of it also is due to Bezu, right? Hyperledger Bezu is an open source team that sits within consensus as well. So there's a lot of synergies that we've been able to leverage from like the technical point of view.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different things I'm really excited and proud about for Scroll, so I'll try to go through them quickly. One thing is like the cross-pollination of contributors between us and the Ethereum Foundation's privacy scaling and explorations team. So that means like our contributors are directly working on what we think is going to be the future of scaling Ethereum. That's a really exciting thing, and those people are also helping us out too. The second thing, I think, is that we have been pioneering the multi-prover approach. So just like you said, with client diversity, you need to have prover security for fault tolerance. So over the next few months, we're working on basically bringing, in addition to our ZK EVM prover, we're going to have a trusted execution environment prover that's going to be based on stuff like Intel SGX on a threshold signature scheme. So that's going to help build another layer of security on proving. And I'd say the last thing is that we've been working really hard on being really as compatible as possible and making it as easy for developers in terms of like opcodes, precompiles. And it's like a little known thing is, as far as I know right now, we're the only ZK rollup that has the precompiles necessary to deploy Noir contracts on Scroll. So that allows you to build stuff with privacy. So yeah, those are all really exciting things all over the place that I'm really happy about.
Fits in perfectly for our last panel that was up here with the privacy talks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Alex?
Well, where do I even start? I think Tycho's, it's a little bit different because we're still in testnet, so a lot of the interesting things that have been happening have been like a long evolution over like the testnet phase. So I think a big thing is Ethereum alignment. So everything about like being a type 1 ZK EVM, so we can really work with the existing dev tooling. We can work with existing smart contracts. It's Ethereum extended. And I think it's been a really long, interesting road with a lot of like open-ended research problems that we've had to tackle from testnet phase to testnet phase. We've tried out different like tokenomics designs. We've experimented with L3s. We've taken a look at like like Scroll, like a multi-prover approach. So we have a based contestable rollup that we're testing out right now in our testnet, and so that's again similar along the lines where you can basically plug and play and use different proving systems in the rollup. So you can use like trusted environments like SGX all the way to the new up and coming cutting edge proving systems. And that's also been a thing, is like the adaptability of like Tycho as a protocol and how things have changed. The ZK world is very new and up and coming, so there's lots of changes. 6 months from now, there might be a new novel proving system. And so I think a big key has been keeping the protocol adaptable and able to sort of be modular in a sense, so we're not relying solely on like one proving type. We're not, when things change, we can keep up with the entire landscape, and it's been really interesting to see us kind of like adapt to that really crazy landscape.
This is awesome. I just reflecting on when starting in the industry here, like where ZK was, to now hearing about multi-clients, multi-proofs, being a type 1, like having different proving systems is like, it's mind-blowing what we've done in the last, maybe 4 years. So just wanted to highlight that really quick. And of course, we talked about the good and the technical. So we've covered the good. Now, thinking about each of these great things that you've had, I want us to also explore like the bad. All of these, while we're trying to achieve like technical greatness, there's a trade-off with some of these things, and it's the challenges you run into or the trade-offs that you make or whatever it is. So just thinking about that perspective, what has been like the challenges from the technical side that you've seen for your guys' projects or for your protocols? And let's go ahead, let's mix up the order, make things spicy. Shayar, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, where do I start? I think, so scalability and costs are probably something that we all have dealt with the growing pains with running a ZK EVM. I mean, like if you go to any like Twitter announcement, probably from any of us, and look at the first few comments, it's like, please reduce transaction costs, please reduce bridging costs. You just got to deal with it. I think with ZK rollups, the thing that people have to understand, obviously, is like initially the prover costs are going to be amortized over fewer people, but over time it reduces as you change the prover scheme, as you change and adapt the circuits, as you optimize those contracts and everything, it gets a lot cheaper. But at the beginning, you can't expect the same experience you're getting from optimistic rollups. And so getting over that bridge of understanding for developers and users that it's not the same user and developer experience at the beginning has been the biggest challenge for us. And I would say, just like you said, continually adapting to this this ecosystem is really difficult, right? Like these circuits that we build to prove these particular opcodes and precompiles, we have to continually adapt and upgrade them. If you ever want to change the prover and verifier scheme, we have to adapt that. We have to also make them simple enough that they're auditable. And if we want to add any of this custom stuff that's part of these new narratives, right? Like the modular narrative, you get an alternative DA later, you have to prove that too. So there's this like constant push and pull of trying to keep ahead of the narrative and keep the same UX and DevX of incumbent alt L1s or L2s that have had time to catch up and get that existing user base. But I think, I'm very positive that we're getting over that inflection point now.
Nice. All right. Emily?
Yeah, I guess there's kind of two ways to look at it. Like, I think generically bad is just trying to build a ZK EVM, right? There's a reason we came out later. I think at least the Linea team has taken a really interesting approach to it in the sense that it used to be 2-step, now it's 4-step proving system, where kind of the translation part of the proofs, we actually just didn't do a snark. It's something called lattice-based hashing, where it's really good for recursion. And then at the very end, it's kind of too big, and then we shrink it down to a snark and whatever. That's probably not the important part. I think I want to talk about the comments on Twitter and what that means in terms of the bad. And I want to speak specifically to I think the user, trying to explain gas prices to users, especially since at the end of the day, we are still affected by L1 prices. And so yeah, if everything is pumping, Ethereum's expensive, whatever, and that's going to affect us, right? As L2s, I'm sorry, yes, the fee will get higher. And it's trying to manage the community of explaining how gas works to a very technical thing to a non-technical audience, many of them just aping into the, the chain and things like that. But I think probably the solution to that is just making everything cheaper, right? Whatever, okay. Which is exciting, right? Because I think from the Linea perspective, we did introduce data compression 2 weeks ago, which reduced our prices by 66%, which is pretty hefty kind of Yeah, and I heard Scroll's kind of be doing something similar soon.
On the way, soon.
Right? Yeah, which is great.
Very cool. Yeah, the YOLOing for some people who just yeet right in. You're like, let's take a step back. That's the one.
So I'd say that the explicit trade-off that we're making with ZK Sync is a performance equivalent one. So we're not a EVM equivalent ZK EVM. So I'd say I would classify as the bad as being like there is an additional barrier to entering the ecosystem. You have specific tooling. You have to adapt a little bit. There is a little bit additional work for you to onboard on ZK Sync, and that's one of the main, I'd say, bad aspect that we saw. But we are actively working on it to bring better tooling. Tooling on which normal devs are familiar with. So yeah, I'd say that has been the main challenge, is that we had great performance at the protocol level, but at the expense of a bit of equivalency. But we're working actively on that and making the developer experience as smooth as possible.
Yep. That's definitely a big challenge for us. Tycho, Alex.
Well, it's been, a long road. I think being Ethereum equivalent and being like a based rollup basically just comes with its own field of like future research questions. So again, this whole landscape is really experimental. A lot of these like protocol designs in general, like design spaces, are really unexplored. So it's a challenge of seeing which direction is the right way to go, where to put all of your energy and what to focus on, because these are all questions that people haven't answered before. This is the first time, we're taking this on. So it just takes some time, and it gets a little difficult trying to figure out, again, like the best way forward, because there's 10 million and one ways to like figure out a way to design this protocol. But I mean, those are happy and open challenges. There's been lots of like collaboration between like the Ethereum Foundation and researchers, like he mentioned with Scroll. Tycho was also working on that like open space collaboration with like the privacy and scaling exploration team on like the ZK EVM circuits. So there's research being done on like based pre-confirmations. Justin Drake is talking about shared sequencing and all that, and there's multiple ways to go around that. There's a million and one questions to answer, and I think the biggest challenge is getting around to all of those. And another less technical but more like prominent like challenge is just expectations. You have this like really opinionated like Twitter community, for example, that you always feel like you're on stage. Like everybody's like waiting for you to make the wrong move so they can make their Twitter comments, and so you always kind of feel like, whatever step you take, you're always thinking about like, what could people say about this? What could go wrong? So it's those expectations of always feeling like no matter what you do, you're always going to like let somebody down, whether it's with an airdrop or, the direction that you're taking the protocol, whatever, people have really, really big expectations. So trying to supersede that and to make the most people happy, I think is a really big challenge.
Yes. And you're right about that. It's like all of us, in a sense, are all like building in a glass house, and it's everybody from the outside who has something to say about what's going on in the glass house. But like we're the ones in there. But everything you do is always on stage, and like that's definitely something that's different about this about crypto that I enjoy, and is also a bad. So good and the bad. Okay. Well, thank you guys. And now let's talk about. So let's look into the ugly side. Like we all know that community is a wonderful part, an extension of a crypto that makes really why most of us are here. It gives the soul aspect to Web 2, gives the ownership, it gives this like camaraderie of a place of belonging. Now we all know those are the good parts, but what's the ugly side that like you're just like makes you like, why am I doing this? Like then you get back and you're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm here. But what just like drives you nuts? What's the ugly side of your role? Because I know not everybody is community leads here, but in different like facets of the community. But what is the ugly side that drives you nuts? And this one, let's go with whoever wants to start. I won't force this on anybody.
I can start off with that. So being a community manager, I'm like, all in on the community. So that's my day-to-day. And it is a really like crazy space. You know, it's almost like the elephant in the room. You know, you have like, you know, we're here in a builders hub. Everybody's focused on protocol, technicals, you know, ideas, building stuff. You know, and the community is just kind of like they're off to the side. Where, you know, a lot of people don't even want to touch it. They don't want to look at it. And I think, you know, you're referring to it as the ugly because, you know, I've even noticed in my space there's like this like airdrop farmer type of like, you know, vibe. There's people that don't really care about the fundamentals, that, you know, they don't care about being part of a community. They're just in, out, try to get whatever they want, you know. Lots of back and forth about like, oh, this is better than this is better than this project is going to win, you know, you have to be a maxi on one project. Yeah. And so I guess I have like a unique perspective. So like with Tycho, I started out as just like a general community member. Like I was just interested in Tycho. Like I didn't know anything like super technical. You know, so I was just in there asking questions. You know, our engineers took time to like talk to me, answer my questions, gave me enough knowledge so I could personally go out there, you know, on our Discord server, answer questions to other people, you know, really inform people about like, you know, how to run a node, you know, what's going on with the protocol. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you know, they really cared, you know, they gave me a moderator position, and then from there, community manager. And so I guess I have this really like personal, you know, interest and like stake in building like a really robust and interesting community. So I think like a big challenge and a big key has been trying to stray away from like the financialization of like a community. And so it's kind of banking off of that ugly. So it's like you have people that, you know, join your Discord server, join you guys on Twitter, you know, for whatever reasons that they have, you know, potential airdrop, this, and that. But people are just there. They're in your community, and it's how you foster that. So what we've really tried to do, and what I've really tried to do, is foster that environment that I was given of like education. So, you know, people have joined, you know, our Discord server. They've never opened a terminal before. They've never installed Docker, you know. And then within a few days, you know, they're there like running a node, running a proposer, you know, answering questions for other people, and people get really excited. So we've seen lots of like community initiatives and like projects where people start, you know, we've had our own community built like prover network where somebody was just like in our community asking questions, and they were like, oh, hey, I could build like a distributed prover network. And that was all community run, you know. So there's been some really beautiful like projects and like initiatives started just from our community, because it's really been all about like cultivating. You got people there for whatever reason that they're there. It's all about, you know, treating everybody with like respect, you know, giving them time and really showing them that like you can learn. It's all about education, you know, really giving people the time of day to like foster that like environment.
Nice. Way to take the ugly and then make it beautiful again. Like, see, it's like it's so hard to make community ugly. All right, so I'll leave it up for the next person who wants to take it.
Yeah, I can take it. So I think there's two ways I can say. Like one, and I think this is like a one-sentence thing. I absolutely hate how everyone calls it an L2 war, which is like the dumbest thing ever. It's not a zero-sum game. Like multi-prover, I guess Linea is the only multi-client one, but no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so stop that. That's ugly. And I think I want to touch a little bit about the financialization of community. And I think, actually, what I think is really ugly is, I don't know if you guys feel this, but I feel like there is an element of developers like pitted against users, Sybils, farmers, right? Because, you know, like I think there's an extent of like, oh, we worship the developer, we worship the builder, which is true. Like they are the ones who build the future. But I think what Linea has done, and I really like from like an L2 perspective of the opportunity that we have, is we have a lot of eyeballs, right? And also, I mean, like, where do those eyeballs come from? So if we look at the Uniswap, the Unidrop, right, that's like average $2,200, which will feed, what, 44 people in Vietnam for a month? This is like life-changing money, right? Which is insane. And so you have a lot of attention. And so like L2s, we have this opportunity to direct the attention back to the builders and say, like, let's spam your network. Your load balancing needs work, or like your UX is really bad, and stuff like that, right? And like also from like an L2 ecosystem perspective, right? We are connected to everybody. We are connected to users, builders from the developer level, like developer tooling, builders from like, I don't even know anything, like you mentioned as well. And there's so much like capital that we can do and interact with people that I think is ugly, the way that we kind of, I call it like, don't villainize the farmer, because they do a lot for us at the end of the day. And I guess the thing that is ugly about them, I'm very fortunate I'm not in your position of community manager. I'm going to be honest, but I talked to them. And it's ugly how nasty internet anons can get.
Yeah.
So please be kind. I'm sure none of you here are mean in DMs. Hopefully not. Yeah.
Cool.
So that's where
Thank
I'm
you.
at.
That's, yeah, they can be mean. That visible wall behind.
Yeah, I'll say that I agree with all of what you said. Whether it's managing the expectations within the community and channeling the attention that is not necessarily focused on the protocol towards the protocol and the mission that we are trying to accomplish with the ZKVMs. I will always remember the first time that we tried to just innocently run a survey through the community, and we had like 15,000 people just sibling the form, all the infrastructure going down in between, and we were like, yeah, I mean, this is not, I mean, essentially, this additional burden from, the community trying to game protocols and the protocol trying to leverage and farm the community, these adds a lot of additional operational burden for us. And, if you want to run a meme competition, if you want to run anything in which there is a minimum at stake, you need to think twice about how you're going to have, on board, what pipeline you're going to have, because that it's going to be C-built, and you have to, take the necessary steps to account for that. So, high expectations from the community creates also high operational burden on our side. So, that's it. I would say that was a bit the ugly side that we faced over the last 2 years. But of course, sometimes how mean the community can be, but also how good and altruistic they can be. I think that comes with the job. Like, we have this broad range of community members, and sometimes there is a very minority fringe that could be very vocal and mean sometimes.
It always seems like a constant fight sometimes, like they change something, so then you change something, and then it adds, like, then they change it this way, and you're like, I thought I already stopped that. So it's like this never-ending cat and mouse, I feel like sometimes too. Shayar?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the points you guys have made. I think there's a lot of difficulty in finding the fine balance between respecting and listening to your community and then kind of focusing on this vocal minority and like bending your will to them sometimes. And there's been a lot of discourse, obviously, about the toxicity of some of the community members and a lot of different reactions across the board. I think my take here is that it's a no upsides move to disrespect or look down on the members of your community, right? There's ways to work around it, and there's ways to focus on the people that deliver the most value. But looking down on them, on people like you said, who for this amount of money is life-changing, it doesn't help anything. And it just makes you seem a lot more highbrow and thinking you're above them when, we're trying to all be very down-to-earth people. And then one other point about developers I think is also really interesting is that we, like you said, we sort of like worship the developers in a sense, and we think a lot about them. Of course, for us, like developer education and thinking about them is the most important thing. But sometimes we silo in on thinking about their needs only. And when you talk to them, they're like, wow, you guys are so compatible. It's so easy to build these contracts. But you don't ever listen to like users. We're like, I want something fun to do. I want to just like be able to gamble with my money. And that might sound trivial to us, but this is a large proportion of what the crypto community is. And I think all of this posturing about trying to be super developer or research heavy, that has to be balanced with a little bit of degen and a little bit of understanding where the community members are at and what they need. That's my take on it.
Awesome. Well, so we got through the ugly, and when we were talking about these things, it made me think of something else. Like, not a lot of people, or when people think about community, they kind of just automatically put it into this subcategory of marketing or of growth, and that's what it is and has been in the traditional Web 2. But Web 3, I see it as completely different, as what we were talking about earlier. How do you guys manage like the internal expectations at your own companies of like, we see, I think from all of us, all of our mission statements or our visions are like community first, community built, community, but it can feel like sometimes inside, like you were saying, like it's something off to the side. Like, all right, we've got this vision, we got this, and like, oh yeah, and community's doing something. So like, regardless of your role, because I know you guys are in different extensions, but like, how do you convey how important like either community or what your role is to internally to your community, your company, so they know that resources need to also be put there. Like, product and everything else is very important, but yeah, community, DevRel, product, or partnership, like all those need attention too. So how do you say, hey, look at me, like and down here?
Any order?
No, any order. I'm down.
I'm happy to go first. So I like to think of, a community. We always say that community Web3 is community first. Essentially, I think the reason why is that there is a protocol supposed to be owned by no one else but than a distributed community, and so the same way that a protocol requires a certain level of engineering, and at some point there is open sourcing and there is a community that gets involved, I think the community also needs a certain form of engineering. You need to design it to be able to have contributors. I think have contributors, have specific opportunities to shine as well, and having the community being engineered. And talk the engineering language to engineers, I think, and see the community as a product that needs to evolve in few cycles. I think this is a way a bit to speak the MEM language with the engineering team. I think that's a barrier that I've seen, that speaking different language, the marketing language versus the engineering language, and turning that into a common vocabulary is a good way to advocate for what you want to try to achieve.
Well, I think, like, the way I look at it is you could build the best protocol out there that has all the best fundamentals. You could have the fastest proving times, cheapest fees, whatever. You launch on mainnet, and if you don't have a community, you don't have any applications on there or anything, it's just a ghost town. What's the point? What's the whole point of building a protocol that doesn't have anybody a part of it? Without the community, the protocol is really nothing. And there's a real utility to having like a really robust and like excited community. It's like you can like blend the community and like the developer side together. So like, for example, like from my personal experience with like, community building and all that, we've gotten to a point where we have a pretty large and excited community behind our testnet. And right now, I'm basically utilizing that community to be a launch pad for all of these new and exciting applications that are being built on Tycho. So it's actually enabling all of these small-time projects that usually wouldn't get enough traction or have enough users to go through and QA test things and get feedback and all that. Having our community there and excited and like ready to learn about stuff and like mess around with stuff on chain and all that has really like fostered this like really incredible launch pad for like our ecosystem projects. So our developers on that side and our ecosystem, they all come together and they figure out like cool ways to like be composable and build on top of each other, and then they learn from stuff, and then they get valuable feedback from our community, and they have this really great like developer experience all from our community. And again, it's when you focus on the non-financial aspects of the community, when you get people excited. It doesn't even have to be like really complex like applications that are deployed. It's like people love to play games. People want to like play games on chain and all that. So you'll have all these projects that come on and they have these new fun novel ideas, and you're able to again bring community and developers together to create this really cool like experience. It's really interesting.
Yeah, the modular system all over again, right? Put things together.
Yeah. I think the point you made at the beginning was exactly right, where you said these are like all extensions of each other. It's really a question of internal structure and culture. Like we see, and I'm sure all you guys feel the same way, partnerships is an extension of DevRel, and DevRel is an extension of community, and community is an extension of marketing. All of them flow into each other, and especially in Web3, they all have to work together very tightly in these like fast iterative loops. I think that's how you get attention on community feedback. Like comms will highlight one thing, and then that comes to DevRel, and we say, okay, is this a technical issue, or is this an issue with a particular project? Does partnerships need to step in? If DevRel has an issue, they bring the rest of the team in. So it's really about highlighting the issues and making sure that every single team member who might be relevant is able to see it, and basically create a culture of like, okay, community feedback is critically important, just as important as an engineer's feedback might be in a sprint. That's kind of how you create a community-led or a community kind of feedback-focused culture.
Nice, that's really good.
Yeah. So I feel like you started off the question saying that, I guess, people don't care about community or it's off on the side, which I feel like is categorically false, right? am I putting words in your mouth? Because that's like kind of the first impression I got.
It comes in both. It's like a dual. Sometimes like people come in and like, yeah, I'm here for the community, but I think you sometimes get to maybe more some projects who are like internally outside, they're like, yeah, all about the community, but internally it's like, like community we'll get to it or whatnot. But I think a lot of people might like what I run into is some people will be like, oh, so you do marketing, and it's like, no, I don't do marketing. And maybe it's not just internally, but it's also like from the external people's like viewpoint. When they think of a community thing, they're like, you're doing ads, you're like a brand ambassador, like doing those types of things. So I guess something in that realm that I mean.
Okay, cool. I guess maybe because we just have like different maybe opinions on what community is. Like I don't think. Yeah. Like, at least for us, our community team does not sit on the marketing team, right? But I think what I will say about community that isn't brought up, that is really difficult to navigate in terms of maybe like resources from like a time perspective, is how diverse the community is in regards to their needs, right? Because user community is completely different from what a developer community needs. And when like all of our teams are really small, right? Like how do you dedicate time to like, I need to take care of my user community while at the same time taking care of my developer community, somehow collating all that feedback and then letting like the product managers prioritize that. And then like even within the developer community, it's split into two groups too, right? Because you have the dApps who are wanting to deploy on mainnet, and that's like partnership side. And I think in general for a chain, that's usually your first priority, because when you launch, you want people to actually be able to do things, right? But when you start focusing on that, then you start to neglect individual developers, people just exploring the space, trying to figure out what's going on. And then you're like, okay, how do I figure out all this like mind share? And I don't know, I think the answer is always just hire more people, to be honest. There's not really a good answer there. Either overwork people and burn them out until they leave, or like hire people and care about their work-life balance. But I will say, I think from like the Linea perspective, community has been like critical, I think, to especially how we've developed the idea of how we interact with users, specifically like farmers or people like that, expecting incentives, and how important like transparency is about what's happening at the time, how like every action or time resource thing that you contribute will actually like manifest later on. Because I think when you pull the rug underneath people who are spending their time, like building with you, like transacting on you or whatever, like I don't know where I started the sentence, but the point is like it's something that you get a lot of feedback on from the community, and like addressing that and making sure they're feeling taken care of and heard and like understood that they are the core of your protocol. Is super important. And I don't think that's a marketing function, and I don't think that is ignored, at least like across the board. I feel like we're all here pretty nice.
That was exactly what I was trying to get across, so that you led into it perfectly. So thank you. We have just a few more minutes left. I wanted to just leave it open for a few questions from the audience, if anybody had any of the more project-focused questions or community-focused questions. If you've got a question, give that hand a nice high raise, and our lovely Albie Codes will come give you the microphone. Give it a little wait.
Questions for the communities? I know it's been a long day.
Oh, we got one right there. The guy in the beanie.
Hey, question. How can these unique communities all kind of connect and work together to kind of solve some of the bad and the ugly that was discussed on stage?
Ooh. Who wants to take that one?
I mean, I guess I'll say, I don't know if it's like, there is an element of we are all suffering the same problems, and I want to say just from like a perspective of working at Linea, it's actually a very collaborative environment from like the L2 side. Like we're all working together and thinking about how like we're solving problems. And I think in the same way, like each of us are figuring out what to do with our communities when they are ugly, and when someone fixes it or does something cool, one of us immediately copies it, which is fantastic. I think so, and that's what you're supposed to do, right? Like, like copy paste other people's success, I think is the way to kind of bridge the ugliness away. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add to that then. We are working also with slightly different tech stack, and so at some point at the engineering level, I think there should be a certain level of standardization that will also bring these communities together. We maybe make the protocol more interoperable. We know already that our communities are, I'd say, overlapping. We're all within Ethereum, but it's true that there is technical differences that at some point over the long term, I think we're going to naturally converge through a specific design architecture that will also bring the communities together.
Yeah, I would say, like, for the community members, like, I think there's this like idea, this like L2 war. It's like complete BS. Like, all our teams know each other. A lot of people probably could have or might have worked at other people's teams. Like, there's a lot of overlap. There's like no war happening over here. So I wouldn't think about like pitting L2s against each other. It's like L2s against the world. We're trying to grow the pie. Like, just try out everything. If you have ideas for interesting applications, try them out everywhere. Get engaged in each community. I think, yeah, the pie that we're trying to grow out is a lot larger than what we're fighting for right now. So just be actively engaged in what we're building right now, and I think it's going to be really exciting in the next like 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and I think I'll go a little bit of a different way. I think it's just like what I try to do with like my community is just remind people that it's not a big deal. Like it's chill. It's like, you know, it's not like life or death, you know, like there's no L2 war. There's not this crazy like, you know, end game or whatever. It's like a really open, collaborative like research space, you know. And so I guess when things get a little ugly or a little bit crazy, it's just, you know, we have like our weekly like community calls and we talk with our community, and there, you know, it's really like getting that message across that like, you know, these things aren't serious. It's not life or death. You don't have to pick one over another. It's just like, come check out what we're doing. We're doing cool stuff. You know, if you like this better, you know, that's cool. But, you know, we're always around. We're always here to help you guys, teach you guys, you know, be a launch pad for your project or whatever. So yeah, again, we all have overlapping communities, so I think it's just reminding people that it's not so serious all the time.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you guys all again for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I just hope that there was something great takeaway for people in the audience as well. Just wanted to showcase that the community, as much as the rainbows and the fun and the unicorns that are out there, there are different sides to it. And there's also this deep complexity level of knowledge that I'm super impressed that a lot of people think that community can be a little bit higher level, but when you're in it, you're cross-functional, you're going between different departments, so you're absorbing the different knowledge along the way because you are the first like part of the funnel of people coming into the community. So you have to have that layer of knowledge to help them along. So thank you everybody for participating in the good, the bad, and the ugly, and thank you for everything you guys are doing for the Ethereum ecosystem. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. So yeah, I'm giving a presentation on 4844. So who is familiar with blob transactions? Okay, perfect. I saw someone pointing at me. Thank you. Be kind of awkward if I wasn't. So yeah, basically we're going to go through an overview of what 4844 is, what are blobs, how does the blob transaction lifecycle differ from the normal transaction lifecycle, introduction of the new fee market, what changes we had to make to ZK Sync, and then what is going to follow. So the TLDR is blobs are cheaper storage on Ethereum. So before blobs, we mainly stored pub data in the form of call data, and then with blobs, we're now able to store it in an area that's relatively cheaper. The back of the napkin math says it's about 93% cheaper when it comes to the amount of gas that's being used. So as many of you may or may not know, Ethereum roadmap is moving to be roll-up centric. And so that puts an emphasis on data availability. So 4844 sets the stage for this with full sharding, while allowing rollups to take advantage of cheaper data sooner. So in the blockchain trilemma, Vitalik basically put it as a blockchain can only accomplish 2 out of the 3 kind of like sectors: scalability, decentralization, and security. We have those targeting decentralization and security, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, multi-chain ecosystems going for decentralization and scalability. But with rollups and becoming a rollup-centric roadmap, we can actually offload the scalability down to the rollups. So Ethereum would only have to focus on decentralization and security while allowing rollups to really put an emphasis on the computation. And now, so how do blobs kind of roll into this whole thing? So with blobs, we have the new storage type that's cheaper, but it's only, the reason it's cheaper is it's only being kept for a short amount of time, around 18 days. And now you might be thinking this becomes a problem, but for many rollups, 18 days is more than enough. Zero-knowledge rollups will really utilize this data within an hour or so as we prove blocks, prove batches to be valid about on ZK Sync an hour after they're committed. And then on optimistic rollups, that data is only needed for 7 days, as that's the time for the fraud-proof challenges. And now each blob is able to handle the amount of data that we have in call data. And given the new targets, we can actually fit there's a target of 3 blobs per block with a maximum of 6 blobs. It's not a ton right now, but this is really just setting the stage for full dank sharding that will introduce up to 64 blob slots. And it basically allowed Ethereum to move the necessary changes for the consensus and execution layer to now, while allowing full dank sharding to be focused on later. And that covers data availability sampling, so each of the consensus layer nodes doesn't have to hold each individual blob, which would add terabytes of storage for them. And in addition, there's the introduction of the multi-dimensional fee market. So it is really just like a complex way of thinking or of saying the way that blobs are being charged for changes versus how normal transactions are being charged for. So if you're used to gas going high for an NFT mint or an airdrop or anything along those lines, those won't affect the amount of cost that the layer 2s will incur, because the market for blobs changes differently than those for regular transactions. So we can go into the blob lifecycle. So when a user submits a layer 2 transaction, those get basically sent to the rollup operator, batched together with a bunch of different transactions for everyone, and then sent to the layer 1 mempool. Once they're in the layer 1 mempool, they get split off into the execution layer payload and the consensus layer payload. Blobs only being available on the consensus layer payload, and on the execution layer, we're able to get a commitment to the blob. And that's how we can ensure that we know what data is in there. It's the same data that we assume, and it'll help us reason about it in the future. And so this is another diagram kind of going through the life cycle. I think it actually does a little bit better job explaining how things get split up. So as you can see on the top right, once the execution payload and the blobs reach the beacon proposer, they get split up into the sidecar, which is the KZG commitment, the blob, and the proof that the KZG commitment references the blob, and then the execution payload, which is everything, including the hash of these commitments, which we'll go into a little bit later. So now, if we don't have access to the blobs on the execution layer, how can we reason about what's inside the blobs? And that kind of sets the stage for KZG. So KZG, which stands for Kate, and then I should remember the other two, but it's the last names of the 3 people who came up with this zero-knowledge proof. And basically, it is a way to form a polynomial commitment of the data. And so if we wanted to know what's in the data, we could just hash it. And then on the execution layer, we could just have a hash to that data. But once we want to reason about what's inside that data, we would have to then provide the full preimage, which would then be inefficient and basically removes the benefits that we get from the KZG commitment. Instead, we can take that data, form a polynomial, and then basically make the commitment to that polynomial. What that allows us to do is we can prove what the data behind the polynomial commitment is by making a proof of, by evaluating a point in that polynomial and basically saying, I know that the value at this point is this value. And over a certain number of points, you then become more and more sure that the data in the blob is actually the pub data that you're committing to. And so the benefit of these commitments is they're significantly smaller than blobs. So for instance, a KZG commitment is about 48 bytes, whereas pub data, which is the main reason we seal a batch on ZK Sync, goes up to 125 kilobytes. So that is significantly cheaper, and the people who end up seeing the benefit of the reduction in this amount of data are the end users. And so I spoke about kind of how we take the KZG commitment and how we are able to prove what data it is, and this is done through a proof of equivalence. And with the proof of equivalence, we basically, on-chain, we're able to take the version hash from the execution payload. We use that along with the opening point and the opening value, and the proof that the version hash corresponds to a KZG commitment that when opened at the opening point will yield that opening value. And with that, we're able to then prove everything we need to know about the blob. This is, for those who are a little bit more mathematically inclined, this is Vitalik's post on how the proof of equivalence can work. And so we started to talk about this multi-dimensional fee market and how blobs are being priced differently than normal transactions, and how this helps when ETH gas price surges. And so with that, they operate kind of like the EIP 1559, where once we hit the target number of blobs that we want in a particular block, the gas price will increase by 12.5%, and when a block has less than 3 blobs, we'll actually decrease it by 12.5%. And this makes it so that we can always be sure that we know when our transactions will get included, and when there's a surge in the normal, when there's a surge from demand for either, again, NFT mints, airdrops, the rollups don't have to pay for this burst in data, nor do they have to delay sending their L1 or their L2 batch commitments, waiting for the burst price to go down. So this is talking about the block size. So as we can see with proto-dank sharding, we have an average case block size of 375 kilobytes. And the real reason why proto-dank sharding was introduced wasn't necessarily for the average case, but you can see how in the worst case, the block size is actually significantly less than what we see in the status quo, which is using call data, or versus a different EIP, which was introduced, 4488, again, not to be confused with 4844, which would essentially, rather than introducing this new, cheaper storage, actually would reduce the amount of cost that call data would have. So now, the most interesting part, how does this all translate to ZK Sync? So in ZK Sync, basically, the way it works is we have our security rooted in proofs, and you can think about our L1 batches as going through 3 major steps. We commit the batch, we prove the batch, and then we execute the batch. And so when we commit the batch, we make changes to the batch commitment now to include both the pre-image of the blob that we're using, as well as we add in the blob commitment. The blob commitment has the version hash, the opening point, and the opening value as parameters. And so these values will then get included in the overall batch commitment and proven later on within the prove batches step. And so with going from call data to blobs, as I mentioned before, we actually bring it down the potential 120 kilobytes to 144 bytes per blob. And our system will handle 2 blobs, so that'll be about 288 bytes, which allows us to have double the number of pub data than we could previously have. So that means with more transactions and more state diffs within the batches, our overall cost will go down per transaction. And another important thing that we wanted to include within our contract changes was not just this ability to utilize blobs, but in the event that the blob fee market decides to go haywire, we want it to be flexible enough to switch back and forth between blobs and call data. And so this allows us to basically retain the finality that we currently have while giving us the flexibility to either opt for cheaper transactions or for, yeah. And so with the batch commitment, we also have to make changes to our prover, which basically creates the changes that we've done in the commit batches step. And so within our proof system, we'll basically take the blob, we'll repackage it we'll take the pub data, package it into our blobs, compute the KZG commitment, along with that, the proof that of the blobs, so the fact that the KZG commitment references the blob, and that using these blob commitments that we've introduced in the commit batches step, that these are actually the values of that, and proving that all these values together will essentially give us what we've committed to on layer 1. And so going into what's next, for ZK Sync, right now, as I mentioned, we support 2 blobs, but in the future, we plan on supporting any number of blobs as the number of blobs overall supported per block increases from 6 to 64. But also with dank sharding, we have more blobs coming, the implementation of data availability sampling, so each individual node at the consensus layer won't have to store all the blobs, but can just store a certain part. We'll have proposer builder separation, which is needed for increased security around different things like MEV, as well as a new 2D KZG scheme. And so I think we have a little bit of extra time left. If anyone has any questions about blobs or anything about that. All right. Oh, I see hands up there. I'm sorry. Oh, so the question was, who is going to be blob ready on day 1? So I can't necessarily speak to the other chains because we're not 100% sure what their progress is there, but I can confidently say that ZK Sync will be blob ready on day 1.
Nice. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And yeah.